a healthy resume, most of it occurring, in the last 8 to 12 years. Not so much active anymore, but decided to make the drive from Maplewood, New Jersey, about 30 minutes away from here, and finds himself at 7-1-1 in the Open.
Yeah, right now, not sure if this is a match with top 8 implication. He is getting paired down, but certainly will help his chances that X1-1 is a record that could get into the top 8.
Yes.
And we'll see where the players are at. Elves has actually been a decently popular deck today.
Yeah, no, we've seen a lot of it. I mean, several times on camera. Ross Merriam is known as being an Elves guy. He plays that deck quite a bit online. But we've seen it all over the room.
Yeah, so we'll see if in the hands of John Orzell it can win this match. Ross Merriam was playing Elves today, as well as our standard champion also playing it. Neither of them are in the top 8. Both of them picking up at least 3 losses.
So Craig here with an opening hand, 2 copies of Wasteland, Gitaxian Probe, and a bunch of blue cards and a Bolt. I imagine Craig's going to be sending this one back.
Yeah,
and
no,
he is.
He's going to go ahead and ship that one. John looks like he's gone ahead and kept his hand here.
But I believe this is one of the matchups where, a lot of times the perception is the Delver decks are all kind of the same thing. They're all doing the same stuff. To some extent, that's true. But the specific differences between Rug versus Bug versus Blue, White, Red make a big difference. This is one of the matchups where I feel like the choice to be Blue, White, Red makes a big difference. The other aspects of the deck, specifically Stoneforge Mystic, make the Elves matchup significantly better. Now, Stoneforge for Umezawa's Jite on its own rarely beats Elves because Wirewood Symbiote can mess it up and Elves is very fast, but when you're supplementing it with Lightning Bolt and Force of Will and other factors, Umezawa's Jite has a chance to just take over the game by itself.
Yeah. So see if he can get there on... it's going to be a replaced sleeve while shuffling, so he actually hasn't dealt out the next hand as of yet. And then looking over to John Orzell's Elves deck, nothing too much out of the ordinary. There are some weapons that he has here. He does play a main deck Viridian Shaman, which actually figures to be pretty good against this Blue, White, Red Delver.
It does give him an out to Umezawa's Jite, which is important.
Yeah, so he has the main deck Viridian Shaman playing some Elvish Mystic in the deck. That's not functionally different than some of the other cards, but style-wise a little bit of a different choice.
You just got to get the Beta Land Awards. You can't show up with the Elvish Mystic. This is a legacy tournament. That's the point.
How do you feel about Fintorn Elves, though?
That's also a classic, total classic.
Okay. So you can cut the Land Wars for Fintorns, but cutting them for Elvish Mystics, not so sure about that.
So it looks like Craig has mulliganed into 3 lands, Swords of Plowshare, Stoneforge Mystic, True Name Nemesis, which is about as good as it gets in this matchup.
Yeah, and we're not even sure whether Craig knows the matchup going into it. But actually, that's a hand that's pretty good in the matchup. An early removal spell, early access to Jite. True Name is kind of, I think, a take it or leave it card in the matchup. But the first 2 spells exactly how he wants to be curving.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he would prefer for the copy of True Name Nemesis to be something like Lightning Bolt or another Plow, but it's pretty close to as good as you could draw it up. See,
maybe something like a Ponder would, I guess, probably be where he'd want it. But yeah, a pretty good hand here.
And John showing a start. A very enthusiastic Elves player here. Foil Windswept, he finds Guru Forest, casts Foil Deathrite Shaman.
Woo! All right, he is.
Sometimes it's hard, it's tough when you're not playing the multicolor decks. You can't get the Beta Tundras or what have you, but John putting in some work here, I mean.
Hard to make your deck worth a fortune when all you play is basics, but and John was up to the challenge.
This opening makes the Elvish Mystics even more surprising.
It might be that the entire deck is foiled, and you can't get a foil Fintorn Elves, for example. Foil Elvish Mystic is easier to find.
That's true. So Stoneforge Mystic here from Craig, off of a second Tundra here, deciding what he's going to go get. This is going to be the sign to see if Craig knows exactly what he's up against. Now, this is not necessarily an Elf start from John. This could be a variety of decks. But if Craig gets Batterskull here, he may lose his best weapon in the matchup for very little value.
We'll see if he can read it. A lot of the decks that play Deathrite Shaman don't go to basic Forest right away, though. And I think Craig correctly reads that and does go for Umezawa's Jite.
Now, Craig's hand couldn't have gotten much better, but he did pick up Force of Will last turn. So now he has True Name Nemesis alongside Force of Will, plus the Umezawa's Jite in hand. Really the tools to take over this game in spite of a mulligan.
Yeah, this is a great multi-6 for Craig. The last thing he doesn't have is he doesn't have land 4 yet. I suppose that could be No, he can just Mystic it into play. He doesn't even need to make 4 mana.
No, he's got it all, man. He's got it all.
Yeah, the weapons John will have to stop this. He could have a Viridian Shaman to stop it, or he'll need Wirewood Symbiote to stop the GT from acquiring counters.
So another fetch here. That's going to go get Bayou. Now we'll see how John wants to proceed here.
Are you going to start on Nettle Sentinel? Foil Nettle Sentinel. Yeah, and another Nettle Sentinel to join it.
So why this is relevant is now Craig needs to kind of probably about face here and try to get the equipment on True Name Nemesis, because he can no longer equip Stoneforge Mystic and start attacking.
Well, he can get one swing in, but you're right, then he would lose Stoneforge Mystic, and John could win through that. The danger is if Craig plays True Name Nemesis here, he takes down his Force of Will, and especially on a board like this, he has to worry that John would play something like Glimpse Heritage Druid, and then the game would functionally be over.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for Craig here, and you can see he's taking his time on this turn. The high upside play here is cast True Name Nemesis, cross your fingers, hope you get out of next turn, and then you can take over the game. The other path here is, you know, sit on your heels a little bit and hope you can pick a better spot to get this Umezawa's Jitte on something. It looks like Craig is going to run the risk here.
Yeah, it's going to be True Name Nemesis. I know that in John's hand he has the Heritage Druid. I don't know if he has a card like Glimpse. Even if he has Heritage Druid Gaia's Cradle, there's a big danger that John wins on the next turn, even without Glimpse.
So Craig doing a quick read here of Nettle Sentinel. And you see him play True Nemesis and give John the point. And now Craig needs to cross his fingers.
Yeah, we do see Heritage Druid and Craterhoof Behemoth in John's hand. I don't know if he has the Glimpse. I don't believe he does. He has Viridian Shaman actually in his hand. So even if he takes a hit off Jitte, it's not that bad for him thanks to Viridian Shaman. I mean, it's not good, but he could still win.
Yep. So here is a Quirion Ranger off of a Dryad Arbor. A promo Quirion Ranger from way back in the day.
To a foil Future Sight. Yeah, this deck is just, he has played Elves once or twice, I would imagine.
Yeah. He's got to step his game up on that Bayou a little bit, but otherwise he's doing just fine. So plays the Heritage Druid and passes the turn. Yeah,
now Craig's getting rewarded pretty well for having his creature be True Name Nemesis. If it wasn't Nemesis, he would be unable to get any counters thanks to the interaction between Quirion Ranger and Dryad Arbor. Ranger can bounce a Forest, which can be, you can block with Dryad Arbor and then bounce it before damage to deny Jitte counters.
So Craig has drawn a copy of Delver of Secrets this turn, which is significant because it is a blue card. And now he really has the tools to take over this game here with True Name Nemesis alongside Umezawa's Jitte. He's not entirely out of the woods yet, but there's a lot of pressure on John to go off sooner rather than later.
Yeah, the big thing is that Craig can Force of Will the Viridian Shaman that's hanging out in John's hand.
So you see True Name Nemesis come across, that's going to trigger the Jitte. And the first order of business for Craig is gunning down that Heritage Druid.
Yeah, he wants to keep John off mana. And that certainly is the largest mana producer that John has. See, in his hand, he has Viridian Shaman, Craterhoof Behemoth. Yeah, interestingly enough, if he didn't make that play, John would be able to make enough mana to cast Craterhoof, untap Nettle Sentinels, and actually swing with probably for a lethal attack.
Yeah. It's not clear if Craig knows all the details of the Elf deck, all the specifics, but he at least has a good enough sense of what the critical pieces are.
So he's going to go 3 mana. Now, Quirion Ranger's trigger is going to bounce a land to untap the Dryad Arbor. That's 4 green. John has not made a land drop yet, so he currently has 4 mana.
So Craig taking an opportunity to respond and taking out the Dryad Arbor before the Quirion Ranger can trigger a second time the following turn.
So it's only 3. Viridian Shaman is cast for 3. And this should give, yeah, this will get a quick Force of Will from Craig. He is now out of cards.
But he's got everything he needs to win on the table. And this is a mighty fine mulligan from Craig Kremples.
The remaining cards in John's hand, Jitte and 1 remaining elf, but, or sorry, Craterhoof and 1 remaining elf, but he doesn't have an answer to Jitte.
Yeah, there's only the 1 Viridian Shaman in his list, correct? That's it
just
for
the
answers.
1.
Yep.
Yep. No way to buy it back, so Jitte is here to stay.
So Craig's going to move the GT post-combat onto the Stoneforge Mystic, giving him the option to block if he's feeling so inclined. Now Craig deciding if he wants to gun down anything here before passing the turn back. And he's going to take that opportunity, take out the Ranger.
Yeah, and it's hard for John to get back in this game. I don't know what plays are available to him right now, if any.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. He can't really damage race anymore because the Stoneforge on defense shuts out that attack.
Right. You see his draw was Verdant Catacombs for the turn. John's going to look. He's going to look for some answers. He goes down to 12.
This has been, it goes without saying here, just the perfect draw, more or less, from Craig. Be surprised if John can get himself out of this one now. He had about a one-turn window where it felt like he could pull through, but now just too much damage has been done to his board.
And it's going to be Green Sun Zenith for 2. We'll see what he's going for here. At 2 mana, I'm not sure what he's looking for. It's probably Elvish Visionary, but that's really not going to help much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the card he gets, but he doesn't have an answer left in his deck to this active GT. It's interesting, almost rather than having Viridian Shaman in his hand, he would have preferred to have had the Green Sun Zenith and been able to Zenith for 3 for the Shamans, that when it was countered, he would have the opportunity to make the play again. Yeah. Now that the Shaman is in his graveyard, he doesn't have a way to blow up GT.
So now Craig has drawn Running Force of Will, so if it wasn't locked up before, now it is super locked up.
So now he has Force plus Blue Spell again. Clutch play there. Really rewarded for that True Name Nemesis turn. That was the big decision for Craig, whether or not to take that risk.
Craig, in my opinion, has historically been a pretty aggressive player. He's usually willing to roll the dice in spots like that where it's some amount of risk, but the upside is huge. I think it's a calculated gamble, but you know, if you're in Craig's spot there, it's hard to imagine that Force of Will is going to keep John off of whatever he's doing forever. Maybe you just need to cross your fingers and hope to get out of that turn, and that's exactly what Craig did.
On the attack, Stoneforge Mystic will go ahead and trade away with one of the 2 Nettle Sentinels. It will get 2 more GT counters, however. And right now there's 1 damage on the Nettle Sentinel. You have to think that Craig is going to use these counters to finish off all the elves.
I think he's clearing them out right now, yeah. He's got the 1 counter left over. That Nettle Sentinel has 1 damage on it. That's an easy one to kill. Takes care of the Visionary if he wants to.
Yeah. He has a GT on a True Name Nemesis and 2 Force of Will blue card in hand against an empty board. The game 1 is going to go to Craig.
Yeah. These draw steps are only going to get more frustrating for John.
Yep. Deathrite Shaman. Heritage Druid.
Yep, that's dead. That's dead.
Yeah, GT has always been a potent weapon against creatures.
And again, it's not enough to just have GT on its own against elves most of the time. You need other stuff, but Source of Plowshare, Force of Will, Craig was flush with other stuff.
Yeah, it does. It gives you this great inevitability, as we see here. You know, it doesn't matter how fast Craig's going at John's life total. He's just going to be able to kill every card that John plays. But it gives you great inevitability, but it doesn't give you good speed. You know, like while Craig was executing that win, he did give John 3 or 4 turns. So having backup removal or counter magic is pretty helpful in dealing with elves, even when you have a GT going.
Yep. So Craig up a game on the back of Umazawa's GT and True Name Nemesis as we go to the sideboard. Craig with a Sword of Feast and Famine, a Swords of Plowshare, 3 in his main deck, and then the 4th one in the sideboard. 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Flusterstorms, 2 copies of Grim Lavamancer, a Wear Tear, 2 copies of Rest in Peace, 4 copies of Meddling Mage. You had to like the 4 Swords of Plowshare here. The 2 Grim Lavamancers, of course, are going to come in as well. What do you think about Meddling Mage?
So, in Craig's side, Meddling Mage is, I don't particularly like it against elves, just because it's never really certain what you want to be naming with the card. Elves is an engine combo deck, and I'm not a huge fan of Meddling Mage against engine combos. You know, there's not like one thing that he really needs to keep elves off of. You can't name any creature because John can Green Sun Zenith for any creature in his deck. Mm-hmm. So then you'd have to name Green Sun, but then he could actually just draw the cards you're trying to Meddling Mage. I just feel like in general, it's not high enough impact to justify the fact that you're playing a 2/2 for 2.
Yeah, a 2/2 body against elves is just not worth very much.
No, it's not much of a card at all. You're just playing it for the ability, and I'm not sure the ability is worth the mana in the card.
Yeah. So what has John got on his side of the table?
On John's side of the board, he has 3 copies of Abrupt Decay and a backup Viridian Shaman. So if this fight becomes about equipment, John has a lot of ways to deal with that. I'd expect to at least see the backup Viridian Shaman, maybe even a Kasali Pride Mage that he has on this board. I don't think he wants to be caught without ways to deal with Umezawa's Jite. That said, he does have like a couple other cards he could use. He doesn't have the Progenitus. I noticed that he does have Natural Orders in his deck, and if he had Progenitus, I would say that would be good here. But he's actually not playing that. He's only playing the World Spine Worm, and because of Source to Plowshares, I don't particularly like that card.
And the Rorik Thar, the Unbowed, is mostly for Storm decks and such.
Yeah, Rorik Thar is fine. I mean, a resolved Rorik Thar wouldn't be bad against Delver, but I don't think it's good enough to justify using.
So the absence of Progenitus is pretty interesting. You rarely see that in Elves decks, and it feels like one of the most important sideboard cards for the deck because there's so many matchups where post-board you're going to be slogging through a lot of removal. It's hard to build up the critical mass for Craterhoof Behemoth, but Progenitus gives you a pretty easy way to steal the game.
Now, World Spine Worm, that's something that a lot of Elves decks have adopted. It gives them some show and tell insurance against Emrakul, for example. They can't swing into it as though it'll swing back for 15, which is usually lethal.
It's also the best natural order target against a deck that's bringing in Perish against you.
Right. They can't. Yeah, it escapes Perish, which is something that Progenitus doesn't do.
Right.
It's interesting, there's some dynamic, right? So World Spine Worm gets around Perish, Progenitus gets around Swords, neither gets around both. So
yeah.
you want them in different situations.
But there aren't a lot of decks that are playing both Perish and Swords to Plowshares. Usually
That's true, yeah.
You know.
And Perish is the card that Elves has a harder time beating, and so having a trump against Perish is probably more important.
Perish is a tough one for the all-green creature deck.
It's not as bad as Engineered Plague, to be fair. But maybe it is now. Now that Elves actually, it might be worse than Engineered Plague. They're both terrible.
They're both really rough.
Engineered Plague actually, as Elves has has become more resilient to the card recently, as it's gotten things like Deathrite Shaman in the deck. Now that it plays Deathrite Shamans live through it, Nettle Sentinels live through it, Wirewood Symbiotes live through it. It kills most everything else, but
you're probably still predicated on Abrupt Decaying in most games where you want to go off, unless you're just natural ordering for something like Progenitus.
Right. Yeah. You can still have some creatures in play, some Dryad Arbors, and you can still just cradle up a Craterhoof and win through an Engineered Plague.
Yep.
We're on to game 2. John Orzell on the play this game. Remember, John is at 7-2, whereas Craig is at 7-1-1. Craig probably has an outside shot here at top 8.
And Craig with another incredible opening hand here. It looks like 3 lands, Stoneforge Bolt, Force of Will, Delver of Secrets.
I mean, having a turn 1 Delver and then a bunch of 1-mana removal seems pretty good against Elves.
Delver is very punishing. Again, Elves has no way to block a flyer, so Delver is about as unblockable as True Day Nemesis in the matchup, and it's 1 mana instead of 3. And these mulligans are very punishing for John, especially post-board. He needs every resource he can get because he's going to be slogging through so many bolts and plows and Lavamancers and counter spells, and he needs all of his cards.
All right, and we see Quirion Ranger as the start for John Orzell. And we'll see that hand that you're talking with, Craig, Delver into a lot of disruption. You can see it take form here.
And he's picked up a Brainstorm, which means he can cast the Delver and still have Force of Will back up.
Good hands here in the matchup.
Yeah.
So there's the clock, a turn 1 Delver for Craig. Actually a decent hand on John's side of the board. It looks like he has a lot of mana accelerants, an Elvish Visionary. We'll see Visionary start out here. If he just has the kind of hand with Visionaries and Glimpse of Natures, it's possible he can escape this 1-for-1 removal hand.
Yeah, that's the plan here. The problem is that it's not just going to be the 1-for-1 removal that is going to cause problems here, but the Umezawa's Jite that's lingering. It's a multi-dimension attack.
Yeah, he does have the Stoneforge to go ahead and get Umezawa's Jite. We see the Delver blind flips turn 1 off a Brainstorm, or turn 2. So he's going to go ahead and flip Insectile Aberration, play Stoneforge Mystic, getting Umezawa's Jite. He can protect the GT with a Force of Will plus blue card right now. And things are looking great for Craig.
Yeah. Thought his hand game 1 was good, but this one is actually
this
better.
One's better. Even though he's on the draw this time, I think this game is still better.
Yeah, I mean, next turn he has the option, for example, to bolt something and deploy the Umezawa's Jitte, which is much better than spending his 3rd turn, casting True Name Nemesis and crossing his fingers.
Right. We're on to John's turn. He has Glimpse of Nature. He can go for this glimpse into mana creatures. We'll see if he does that. No, he's just going to go for another Elvish Visionary. Right now, buying a lot of card advantage. Before, that looked like a great strategy. Now that he knows that Craig has a GT, John may need to adapt his game plan. The All Visionaries and Glimpse hand is great against bolts and swords, not particularly good against GTs.
Yeah, and he might want to spend. It wouldn't surprise me if he was saying this one turn is going to be my setup turn. I'm going to find another card, find another land for next turn, then try to leave myself with as many 1-mana cards as possible so I can glimpse next turn and start going. The problem, of course, is that all of this fails in the face of the Force of Will in Craig's hand.
I mean, Craig can Force of Will bolt and swords if he wants to.
So Craig picks up a Gitaxian Probe.
Even better, knows what he has to. This hand just keeps getting better for Craig.
Yeah.
So we see Glimpse, Heritage Druid, Deathrite Shaman, and a Taiga. So John was setting. It does look like he's setting up for a big Glimpse of Nature turn. But I have to think that if Craig saves a Force of Will for this Glimpse of Nature, that the GT should be able to do the rest of the work.
Yep. And at this stage of the game, it's almost worth spending a card to just look at John's hand. So the fact that Craig gets to draw a card off of all of this is even sweeter. So Craig now knows that his Umezawa's Jitte is safe for the time being, and that there's a very juicy target for that Force of Will.
Right, Devil of Seekers crashes in and puts John Orzell down to 14. Yeah, what a great hand. GT, Force, Brainstorm, Lightning Bolt.
I think if Craig drew like this every single time, he would have never quit Magic.
I don't think he has. I don't think he has the swords. I think we maybe were overestimating.
No, there's just a bolt.
Just a bolt.
Just a bolt.
Draw for John is another land. Verdant Catacombs. That's not going to help at all. He's going for the Glimpse turn, and I can't imagine this will resolve.
I agree.
And with no... Well, there is one thing. Yeah, if Craig didn't have the flyer, John could use the Quirion Ranger plus Dryad Arbor. Well, he didn't have the flyer or the Lightning Bolt. He could use the Quirion Ranger plus Dryad Arbor to stop GT counters from happening, but Craig has that covered twice over. I think we're going to see a repeat performance of the GT versus Elves matchup.
And there's the emptying out by John. A lot of mana available to him, but not much to do with it.
And John knows how this ends. He saw the Stoneforge get the GT. He knows that Craig's flashing it in on at the end of turn. His entire board, X1-1s and 1-2s. And this is going to be pretty rough for him. So we see that a fetch of a Tundra on end step for Craig.
And this is one of those spots where having something like the ability to natural order for Progenitus is so important. It's hard for Elves to fully go off in the face of, all this disruption from these decks post-board, but John could have easily stolen this game with a natural order.
Yeah, Craig goes at it on end step. He bolts the one creature with more than one toughness, flashes Umezawa's GT into play, and 5 1-1s remain. He's going to take them off 2 at a time, and draws another Stoneforge for the turn.
Now, Craig still has to be conscious of natural order for Craterhoof Behemoth. And there is still some risk there, so.
Yeah. He is actually playing around that really well by using cards like Lightning Bolts to aggressively reduce the number of creatures on the battlefield. That's the best way he can play around what John's doing. Oh, and brainstorming into another Force of Will plus blue card's pretty good too.
Yeah.
Seems like he just continues to just have him covered.
Yeah. So this involves, putting back if he wants to keep the land and equip Jite this turn, which you... Oh, no, he doesn't even need to do that. He's got 2 mana left over.
Yeah, he has.
So he just gets to, he gets to keep it all.
His top cards were the land, a blue card, a Force of Will, and a Swords to Plowshares also.
Sure.
Yeah, so he's got a couple things covered.
Yeah.
And this has got to be frustrating to play against from the elf side. This just seems like a nightmare with what's happening.
I mean, you know that Jite is a card in Legacy. This is, you're kind of...
Yeah, you knew Jite is a card. You just have to hope it's not backed up by Force, Bolt Path, Bolt Swords, on curve.
Well, you know, if it...
Flips Delver.
It's really hard for there to be bad draws here because the rest of the deck is cantrips and Grim Lavamancers. So it's hard for Craig's lands and spells hands to not be very good against elves.
We see a swing in with the Insectile Aberration. That's 3 more, puts John Orzell down to 11. Takes care of 2 creatures, both the Heritage Druid and the Quirion Ranger. John draws a card, passes back the turn. And the beats continue. Insectile Aberration puts Orzell down to 8. 2 more counters. Once again, he's just gonna, I think he's gonna use them right away to take care of more creatures.
Just erring on the side of caution here.
First Dryad Arbor. And, all right, he's going to wait 1 turn, but he still has Force blue card swords at the ready.
Yeah.
Just in case John draws anything.
Yeah. Viridian Shaman, I guess, is something he would want to protect himself against.
Sure. At this point, with John at 7 and his board pretty much binned, Craig could even afford to lose the Jite, and I don't know if John would be able to beat the Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, even if John drew Abrupt Decay here, yeah, he's tapping.
That is done. So Craig Kremples, 2-0 in convincing fashion, moves to 8-1-1 with a victory over John Orzell, and he has done all that he can do. Now he will wait to hear his fate for the top 8.
Again,